I am going to make Donna the spotlight. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So please tell us about yourself and about your book.
So I'm Donna Freitas, and I've been a writer for a very long time now. I've written lots of books for kids and also lots of nonfiction books. But The Nine Lives of Rose Napolitano is my first novel for adults. So it's got a very pretty cover. I really love it. And it is about a woman who does not want children, but whose marriage has come to rest on whether or not she will change her mind. And in some versions of Rose, she has a baby, in some versions she doesn't. And you get to see how her life plays out depending on how she makes this decision. And so I think the book it's about more than motherhood or becoming a mother. It's also about marriage and friendship and career and just choice, I think, in a woman's life in general. So yeah, so that's my brief description of the book and intro.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the book, and by the way, the cover really is beautiful, and when I was making promos for it, I was kind of trying to play with the whole idea of, they're just because it's very it's beautiful, but there's segments of different flowers, and very much like the book, there's segments of rose. But one of the things that in many descriptions of this book, and once again, I'm going to say, audience, please feel free to throw your own questions and insight in. But one of the questions that kept coming up in all reviews or blurbs about this book was what is it? Can Rose just do this one thing? And as a woman and a mother and I love my career and I work full time, but I also love my kids. It's not one thing. You can't boil motherhood down to one thing. And if a woman is choosing not to have children, to say, can't you just do this one thing, is just a disservice to women and to mothers even.
So did you have I mean, are you asking about?
What are your feelings about that? And when you started bringing Rose to life, just centered around this question, how did it all start to come together?
Well, I mean, I feel like I haven't seen Rose in literature before, which is why I wanted to write her. I don't think we have a lot of books about women who don't want children. We have a lot of books about women who are mothers or who want to become mothers, or women who want to get married, but we don't necessarily talk about women who don't want children unless they're we think of Mrs. Bates, I feel is the classic example of the spinster, or the woman in the attic. I feel that's the other one, because I kept trying to think of, before this book was coming out, I kept trying to think of where are the women who don't want children in the literature, and I think they're mostly Mrs. Bates characters. And so I really wanted to see a different woman who was feeling that way. I wanted to see her in literature. So that was what was behind me wanting to write about Rose. But I also felt I was just interested in all the different ways this could play out in her life, I guess. Just what would it mean if you were this woman who didn't want children and then you went and you had a baby? What would that experience be? Would you magically love becoming a mother? Would people judge you more closely because they knew before you didn't want kids and now you had one, and then you'd feel pressured in that sense even after you went and you did the thing? And or what would she be happy if she said no? People tell you all kinds of things about how you're going to regret it if you don't do this one thing, or you're going to grow old and alone. And I sort of wanted to think through what would her life be if she just refused to make this choice. And I just think it's an interesting, it seems to be controversial in our culture when women choose not to have children. We just don't, we really try to make them do it. And I just think that that's so interesting, that this choice itself, the idea that you would refuse this one role, that is just one role among so many women, so many different roles that women occupy. But we really want women, it seems, to occupy this one role above all else. And so I'm just interested in that situation that all women seem to face.
Y- Yeah, I would agree that
Definitely.
yeah, and Stacy and I talk about it all the time. Like people can't like even and then if you do that one thing, people can't stop judging you about
was-
how you're doing it.
Well, I wasn't even going to say judging, but the pressure to even add on to it, like, oh, like I had a son in 2019, and I've had not many people, mostly family, just be like, number two, number two,
Yeah.
number two, and I'm just like, hold your horses, like. It's just, I definitely agree. I don't think we have characters like Rose out there. It's very nice and refreshing to have that in a book, because you might have, like, we were Jessica and I talked about this, like it like with alternative histories or stories of the character going through stuff of, oh, like what if they made the decision for this, or like did that, like a Sliding Doors, or My Real Children by Joe Walton, like something like that. But usually it's not, oh, like I don't want kids, let's see what happens. It's, oh, like this is if I met this guy and I had these kids, or I did this and just, we didn't end up having kids, but it had nothing to do with the main character saying, like, that's not for me. And it's really nice to see that, because I have one of my best friends is just like, yeah, like I don't want kids. And people, I mean, someone has a comment of it, but the pressure and the judgment that women get compared to men, it's just mind-blowing to me. Because I mean, I know someone, one of my husband's friends is a young man, and was like, kids are not for me, I do not want kids. I don't see myself wanting that, I don't want to be a parent, and legit, like, took the steps to make sure that doesn't happen at early 20s doing that. And not a lot of judgment, being like, oh, it could be reversible maybe in the future. But if I feel like if that friend was female, are you sure?
There's no way. I actually know people who have been in that boat and said, they're women, they want to take like a step, and like they won't do it. Like the doctors will not do it. So we do have some audience questions.
Yeah, I like Anna's question, because she said, why do you feel that this pressure exists even in 2021? Because like I feel like it's something, from like the 50s of like, gotta be a mom now, go to college, go get your MRS degree.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, because it does feel like this weird, almost frenzy. Like I felt when I was making this decision myself, or I mean, I didn't really want it to be a decision. I felt really strongly that I don't want children, which is part of why I wanted to write Rose. But I was really pressured to change my mind, and in my early 30s, it seemed like, I think I figured out eventually as I got into my late 30s that, oh, in my early 30s when I said this, people didn't really believe me, because as I got older, the older I got, the closer I got to 40, the more people were like, oh, she's really gonna do this. Like like she's really not having children. Oh, she meant what she said in her early 30s. And now we've got to like convince her why she has to change her mind. And, sometimes I think like, what is it? Like, what are people so afraid of if women don't do this? Because I think there must be some sort of fear around, like sometimes I think it's like fear of women becoming independent, or or just like literally independently like deciding this is how I want my life to be. Because I think there's a way in which women's lives, because women are expected to become mothers, there's a familiarity to them. So like I think people like, I guess I'm meaning men, like men can just feel comfortable that like, oh, a woman, she may want a career when she's in her 20s and her 30s, but then as she becomes a mother, she's going to pull back. And and then when women don't do that, I think sometimes it's scary. Like I think it's scary for men, like when women stop being so predictable maybe. But I do think that there's there's almost an obsession around making sure that women do this one thing, or at least that's how I felt when I was going through my 30s. And it made me, I guess, sort of suspicious. Like, why is it that you need me to occupy this one specific role? Like, what is this doing for you? Like, why do we need that? And I don't, it's hard not to go to these places where I'm like, oh, this is a way, like motherhood is sort of the container that certain people feel comfortable like keeping women in. And if they start breaking out of that, then who knows what will happen? Like, who knows what will happen? So that feels scary to people, which I know sounds sort of conspiracy theory like, but sometimes it feels that way. Women make this choice.
I mean, listen, I think, and I can't remember if it was, and actually, Stacy, would you do us the favor of in the chat, put a link to the podcast interview we did with Donna, because I can't remember, was it you who I was saying that I feel like, first of all, like mommy culture on social media is dystopian? Because it really is. Like, you know, you're talking about like putting people into boxes, and then it's become like, you know, like you can't be, you can't be, even if you're in that box, then there's like other boxes you have to check off, and each one is judging the other, like, oh, you know, like, what, you didn't breastfeed? Well, what kind of mother are you? Or you know, like, oh, well, I co-sleep. How could you do that? It's just like, there's, you know, and nobody really wants to just be like, hey, you know, we all have to kind of figure out our way of doing things, and that's fine too. But it's just like, it's just become like even like a battlefield for people who do want to do that. And I could see it being a turnoff for people who've already made up their minds, and seeing their friends dealing with it and being like, yeah, that's exactly why I don't want this.
I do think that there's just so much judgment of women in general around this issue. You're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And you know, I'm not sure what to make of that. Like, what is going on that there's such this very strong impulse to judge how women are either making this choice, or the way they're making this choice, or if they do become mothers, how they're becoming mothers, and the choices that they're making. And there seems to be this obsession around, or like a spotlight on like what we like to watch women do this, and then like, you know, as though it's like a sporting event, and then we're judging, you know, like how they're doing it.
It's like the Roman Colosseum. I mean, again, you know, like, and then
gladiator fight
questions. But yeah, like, okay, you know, like, we're doing this, like, well, why aren't you sharing more pictures of your kids? Oh, your pregnancy was bad. Oh, that's why aren't you taking more vitamin E? Or, and then like, did you put suntan lotion on your kid? I mean, it's, but part of that is because we're also now primed to share everything. So and that's, I think, like, that's like modern culture, but because women's roles are changing, and I think you were saying, you know, as women became more independent and, you know, started like having careers outside of the house and speaking up and doing things, the judgment that you're not in the house with your kids, having kids, is just, it's so commonplace. And so this is like, now that I think more and more people are saying this shouldn't even be a decision, this is just, I'm just not having kids, the judgment has shifted to that as well. So clearly there must be something wrong with you, because you're like, your role as a woman has to be fulfilled by this. Because,
well, I think that's part of the issue, is that in theory the ultimate fulfillment for women is to have a child. And kind of like you were saying earlier, Jessica, I mean, and the thing is, though, women have many avenues for fulfillment now, like, you know, their friendships, career, family beyond just having children, just like the entertainments of life, like travel and just food. Like there are lots of different ways to be fulfilled, and motherhood is one of them, but it's not the only one. And I think part of what's happening is that there are women, I think especially like in their 20s and 30s, who are just saying, oh, my life is fulfilled as it is. Like I don't need to take this other step. There's lots of options for my fulfillment. And I think people don't know what to do with that. Like one of the things that was really surprising to me, and then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, that makes sense, was so my book got picked for one of the celebrity book clubs. It got picked for Bellatrist, which is Emma Roberts' book club. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I remember thinking like, oh, that's like the edgy 20 something, like early 30 something book club. Like it seemed like, oh, like it's like the millennial book club picked my book club. Like that's so interesting. And because I was sort of imagining it like older women reading it, or I don't know. And then I was like, oh, that actually makes sense. Like the whole book is about like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Why are people so obsessed with this, like me doing this or this decision? Like, so Rose is really feeling like eyes are on her about whether or not she makes this decision. And I thought, oh, that is really like a 20 something, 30 something decision. And so in a lot of ways, it makes sense that Bellatrist like would be the book club that picked this. And it's been interesting how many young women have read it and like reached out to me about the fact that they actually don't, like they've never wanted children, and they felt like, oh, finally like a book that's going to like speak about this to me, which I thought was so interesting.
Anna just commented, the topic is very relevant to 20 somethings.
It is. I kind of wish that this book was available and out there for me to read like before I had my son, not just because I think it's such an interesting topic. And there might be like nonfiction books about it of like, do you want to be a parent and parenting, like stuff like that. But to have a fiction book and explore all these different things, like I think that's needed. And it's interesting because we had an author visit of like, oh, would you recommend this book before having kids? And it was I think it was Julia Fine's book, Jessica, that someone asked, like,
which mixed horror tropes with postpartum psychosis. So,
what is it called?
They were like, oh, would you recommend this?
The Upstairs House.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they were like, would you recommend this? And I was like, this would be a book I would recommend, not as like you need to read this to make your decision, but it's an interesting book that'll open up the discussion, because you said, Jessica, it's not like a decision, it's someone's choice if they don't want to have kids. But people seem to think, especially for women, it's a discussion and everyone's involved. And I'm like, it's not, because I'll be completely honest, like my husband had baby fever and was like, let's have a kid. And I was like, I don't know, like I do want one, but like I also like my life, and I'm selfish and honest enough to admit that, like I like being able to travel. I like being able to buy something like that if I wanted to. And some people are just like, you know, it throws into a whole thing, because now all I'm thinking about is oh my God, the book we need to talk about, Kevin, like she had her son, didn't feel that maternal instant connection, and it's like, oh, now that's going to be another worry of mine, is my kid gonna, you know, do something crazy if I don't have that connection. And it's a role that not everyone needs to take and shouldn't be forced into. And as Anna brought up, like, why is the pressure still? Because I think what you said perfectly, people are still afraid for whatever reason. It's a subject to, like, we need to have more books about that, to just have crazy combos. But I think it's very relevant that 20s and 30s, because that's the age people start pushing you to be like, are you going to have kids now? Oh, you're married? When are you having children? You're not having children yet? Why not? Whether it's friends, family, strangers. And I like that Bellatrist like chose it, and I follow them on like for stuff because I'm in the millennial age range. But I still think the book is also really good for older readers too, because it could have people reflect on their life. I think it's a great book for book discussions, all ages, and male or female, whatever you want to go by, just because it's such a discussable book and brings up so many questions to delve into and philosophize about. So Thank you for writing it. That's my rant.
I just want, oh, having an echo problem. Okay. So an anonymous attendee says, hi, love to the book. How is this different than writing an adult book? I guess maybe that meant different than writing a children's book.
Yeah, I'd say that, or maybe did she mean
Yeah.
not writing different from a nonfiction adult book versus fiction? I'm not sure.
Or I bet it's for YA or like children's versus adult. That's my guess. I would say it's not different. That the topic itself, like when I wrote this book, I didn't decide, oh, I'm going to write a book for adults now. Like I just asked myself, what do I want to write about next? And I realized, oh, I want to write about a woman who doesn't want children. I guess that's not a YA novel. So, so the topic was not for, young adults or middle grade readers. But when I was writing, I actually thought to myself, oh, this is such a YA novel in the sense that like I learned to be a novelist by writing books for kids. And, there are certain things that you really think about as a writer for kids and for young adults where, you think a lot about momentum and tension and, reluctant readers, like how do you grab your audience really fast and how do you hold your audience? And I actually wrote an article for LitHub about this that like I think it's something like grab your audience and hold them or something. That's the title they gave it. And I think you're always thinking about that. And I feel like we're all kind of reluctant readers in a way, like no matter what age we are. It's I think one of the big joys of picking up a book and being grabbed right away is that experience where you're like, oh, like I'm just in this right away. And so I feel like I applied all those rules um, that I have for writing for kids when I was writing Rose, because that's just the writer I became because I started writing for kids. So I hope it's a book that also appeals to reluctant adult readers. Or that I hope it holds people's attention when they read it.
I think the fact that it has, because I know that there's been a trend over the last few years about books that have like alternating narrators. The fact that like it was almost like micro narrators, but they were all technically the same person, like an omniscient narrator, but focusing on the same person, but also slightly different because we're also defined by the choices that I was about to say the mistakes that we make, the choices that we make, mistakes or not. That I agree with you that it would appeal to a reluctant reader because it brought like it was definitely a book to sob through, but because of the presentation, it didn't feel like it wasn't like an anvil was being dropped on you. It was like you were taking a walk and just going through different paths and looking at different scenery.
Oh, well, I hope it's not like an anvil.
Not at all. No, that's what I'm saying, because like a lot of books that are considered like, like really emotional books, it's just like they could just be really heavy and it's like here, bong, and you're just like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it wasn't like that at all. It was really just a really good like walk through different emotions.
Well, I think the other thing that felt really related to me in terms of writing this book to my relationship to writing children's books is I think one of the really wonderful things about writing young adult literature is that it's very voicey, or like it can be very voicey. And I think I'm a voicey writer, but also people take a lot of risks structurally and plot wise. Like there's no real, like I feel like in children's books, you can do whatever you want. Like, like you can write fantasy and sci-fi and like and people play around with structure a lot. And so I feel like as a children's book writer, I learned to not be afraid to break rules because people are doing that all the time. And I think, so when I wrote this book, I sort of dove right in and I just thought, well, of course I can give a woman 9 lives. Like that works. And like I don't have to explain myself. Like I've had a bunch of people at events ask me, like, why didn't I explain? Like I didn't try at any point to explain why she has 9 lives or what the mechanism was. And I was like, no. I was like, I don't need to do that. Like you just sort of have to give yourself over and go with it. And if that's not your thing, then it's not, but I think the idea that I could write a woman 9 different ways or like 9 different lives, that sense that I could do that came from the world of children's books. So I feel like I really, even though this is a book for adults, I feel like my skills as a writer came from a different place. But I think they're applicable anywhere. Like I think being a children's writer teaches you so much about just how to write good stories, or I hope so. That's how I've felt about being part of that world.
Stacy, did you have you were going to take a question, right? This is a good one.
I was, but another anonymous attendee, or the same anonymous attendee, actually has a question that connects to what you just said. Of they want to know, how did you keep each rose separate and distinct when you were writing them?
I mean, I didn't. Like I knew that I had 9 different versions of where I wanted her life to go. Like I had these different things I wanted to tackle. Like I knew I wanted there to be a rose who or a couple of roses who dug in their heels and then dealt with the consequences about saying no. Like I knew that I wanted there to be a rose who was like, all right, fine, I'll get pregnant. And then who's just like, oh, like I can't believe I went and did that. And it makes her just angry. I also wanted to write a rose who was like happy as a mother, like who turned out to be like, all right, I like this. Like, okay, I'm glad I have this daughter. I mean, I think the roses that have a baby, really, she loves her daughter even as she resists the role still. But I like, one of the questions I've gotten a lot is about the structure, and if I had a murder board, basically, like if I had a map. And getting this question a lot has made me think a lot about who I am as a writer, and the fact that I have a math brain. I was almost a math major in college, and I've always been this math person. I'm like one of these people who loves word problems, and I realized from this question that, oh, like storytelling for me is kind of like math. Like I do it all in my head. And so even though one of my editors for this book had like she did a color coded key for all the roses. And then I remember she turned it into me. She was very proud of it. She was just like, and it was like all colorful. She had like used different colored fonts. And I was like, oh, this is so pretty. And I like never looked at it because I could just sort of hold them all in my head. So I felt like this book was, I had this character Rose, this decision she was making one way or the other sort of fragmented her in all these different directions. And then part of like, she was like a puzzle that I had to sort of hold all together. So like, even as I'm using my hands, I'm like, oh, this is how it appears in my brain. It's like this big 3-dimensional thing in my head. So.
I love it because you talk about how like with the whole like murder map thing, I'm just thinking of those like quizzes you see in magazines of like, all right, you start here and then you go here, like almost like a also choose your own adventure type thing. Like this is what happens when you make this choice. But I like the puzzle analogy.
It was really fun to write this way, as like I actually thought like, oh, I want to write all my books this way. Like it felt really exciting to get to watch a character make all these different choices. And I also thought there was a way in which the structure allowed for Rose to do things that in a story that was just more straightforward, she would be judged for in a way that I don't think she'd get away with. Like, I think some of the choices she makes, which are so against the grain for what we expect for women, or we just don't think women should be acting this way or saying these things or doing certain things that Rose does. And I think as a writer, I spent a lot of time thinking about, like, for those of you who read the book, I'll just talk a little bit about the beginning. The first 2 pages, Rose is in the hospital. She's just had a baby. She's looking at the baby, like it's like this like mother and child moment. And she's like, how could I have ever not wanted you? And that's partly there as a way to then, like, the next page, she's just like, I am not having a baby. I said I never wanted a baby. And she's like throwing a bottle of vitamins at her husband and is like, go to hell. And so I sort of felt like, I think we were really like, kind of like we were talking about how women, like people are so judgmental of women. I think as readers, we're really judgmental of women characters. And so in some ways, like giving the reader in the beginning, like Rose, the glorious mother, that allowed me to then like go there next and get like, give you like Rose, the angry, like person who's like, no way am I doing this. And who's like telling her husband off. And I feel like there was a constant bartering for me of like, okay, I can give you like loving Rose. So then I can give you like Rose who's going to go have an affair while she's 9 months pregnant. So, and that I was kind of constantly negotiating that. Because I think like even when I was going through edits, there was this issue of did Rose need to feel more guilty about her decisions? Like that came up. And I was like, no, like I don't want her to feel guilty. Like I want to let her just be angry and to just sort of go after what it is that she needs. But I think even as readers, we feel maybe uncomfortable letting women characters do those things.
Do you want to take go ahead.
Yeah, we have a question from Anonymous. Did you think Luke was the right partner for Rose when you were writing him?
I think in the beginning, I don't want to give the end away. I would say in the beginning, I thought yes and no. So, and then I feel like as I wrote, my feelings about him and their marriage changed. And so that's kind of cryptic, but I don't want to give away what happened.
That's totally good. No spoilers here.
No, not at all. That's actually very well put. I'll take this next one. The thing that I loved was Luke's parents were pushier than Rose. Was there a reason you chose to make it that way?
I think I'm interested in kind of like what you were saying earlier, Stacey. It's like you got married and people were like, when are you gonna, like suddenly all these eyes are on you in a certain way. And I think that family opinions can really affect a couple. And I think family opinions about this issue can really affect a woman. And I think people, family in general, like extended family, can feel like they have a right to weigh in on this decision in a person's life or in a couple's life. And so in a way that can be really wonderful and in a way that can be really toxic. And so I wanted to represent that. I feel like a lot of people talk about, like a lot of my own women friends will talk about the pressures they've felt from their in-laws or even just for how to raise their kids, like everyone weighing in on you should be doing this or you should be doing that. Or when I was a mother, like I did this or like I think you kind of like you were talking earlier about the co-sleeping, or I think often some of the biggest judgments that we get or the most powerful ones are the ones from our extended family. And they're the most powerful because they're our family. And, we have to see them. And they're just part of our lives, no matter what we can't unfriend them. Like they're just in our lives. And so I really wanted to represent that. And I mean, I think on that note too, my favorite part of the book is probably Rose's relationship with her mother and the conversations that she has with her mother. And I feel like, one of the things that I didn't know when I was sitting down to write this book was, this is a book about women and like women's relationships and intergenerational conversations between mothers and daughters. And, how mothers and daughters sort of have this conversation together about who they are as women and what role motherhood plays in that. And I think the way that Rose and her mother struggle through that conversation about should she become a mother, and how does her becoming a mother or not becoming a mother reflect on her own mother's like identity. I think for me is really at the heart of the story. Like, it's, for me, that's the heart of the book, I think, is their conversation. So I also feel like I don't know that I've seen those conversations quite so much in literature, because I don't think we see too many women who don't want children and how that would play out with their mothers.
Yeah, a lot of times it's the mother really judging how her daughter is being a mother, which
Yeah.
goes back to the whole dystopian Roman Colosseum
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting with having Luke's parents be pushed here, because with that, it made me think of in society, like across like cultures, how it's like men to continue on like the lineage and the family name. It to me, like that's what it brought up when reading it. I was just like, oh, like, and it's probably because I will fully blame my reality TV watching on that, because I had just watched oh my god, what is it, Bling Empire, I think it is, which is reality television, and they're talking about, this one couple having another kid, and she's like, I don't want to, even though her eggs were frozen, like they're ready to have the kids. And she's just like, I had so much pressure from my husband's parents. When are you gonna have another one? Like, we gave you a grandson. And it made me think of that when reading it, of the in-laws being pushier. But also it's very different from my own life of that, of with in-laws and parents. But it made me think of that rather than just like, I didn't even think to go, even though the book delves into the, as you said, the intergenerational. But what I think really, to me, just what you just said, like, of how having a kid or not having a kid reflects on the mother of the person making that decision. And that, I was just like, realizing that and reading that, I'm just like, oh my god, yes, like, yes, because that's happens today, and with societal pressures and norms and opinions, it just, this is just another reason why I need to push this book on more people, of like, here's another one, like, aside from it just being a good book to read and a beautiful cover, if you want to judge a book by the cover, we're having great conversation, bring it to your book clubs. We have them at the library. Everyone loves the book. I was like, because you even got starred reviews from like Publishers Weekly, Book Looks, and Kirkus. And Kirkus like never gives stars.
Curtis is really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very excited about that.
But it's such a refreshing book that I think, I mean, when you said, Jessica, how like it's not like an anvil of like all these heavy, like, oh my god, we're gonna drown you in all this and you're never gonna escape this pit of despair of a book, and it just weaves you through. I just think it's very realistic writing, and you broach things that people think about and talk about, maybe not in the open, but it's stuff that's relevant to people's lives, which brings us to the question Jenna wants to know: would you consider this book sci-fi?
No. I mean, definitely not. I just think of it as realistic fiction.
That's what,
And
yeah.
it just has, a twist to it. And I mean, really really where the 9 lives came from is the fact that I knew I wanted to write a book about a woman who didn't want children. But as soon as I knew that, I was like, oh, but which book will I write about that woman? And because I could imagine going it in so many different directions. Like, I was like, oh, well, is it going to be the book where she has them anyway and then she regrets it? Or where she digs in her heels and then we see that play out? And I just couldn't decide which way to go. And then one day I was like, oh, what if I could write all the stories? What if I need to write all the stories? Because, they're like, I want to, like, there's so many different ways her life could go, and we don't really see this woman in literature. We don't really see the woman who's resisting it this way. And I really wanted to look at her from lots of different angles. And so really it just like became this opportunity to show, like, I feel like she's all the roses, like she's they're all different, but then they're all her. And so it's like we get this woman sort of refracted through all these different possibilities. So it doesn't feel sci-fi at all. It just felt like, oh, well, I know as a person, I have a really hard time making decisions. And so I lay in bed at night and I extrapolate all the different possibilities. And for me, it felt like just following my brain, all the different places it wanted to go. So that gives you an idea about what my brain is like. So
There was by the way, just kind of because it made me laugh, there was a comment earlier in the chat that says you can't divorce your
I know, I saw that. You can't.
I mean, you can, but it is at the expense of
Yeah. You
yeah,
also
and
have to get divorced
Yeah.
to do that.
yeah, and even if, I mean, I know people who are estranged from certain family members, like that's not without consequence and tough
Yeah.
decisions. So and then Anna says, in your mind, was one rose more authentic than another, and then answered my question.
I've had people, one of the things that's happened, well, so this is definitely, I've never had a response to a book I've written like I have had to this book. And, one of the great joys of having written a book is when people read it and then they talk to you about it, because they feel like, I'm just going to sound like an advertisement for the library, but I mean, what's wonderful about like reading books or writing books is it like suddenly it puts you in conversation with people, and all these conversations open up to you, or people want to talk to you about things, and so suddenly you just find yourself talking to people. But anyway, I wake up and I feel like every morning there's this really passionate letter from someone who read Rose. And so it's felt, but one of the things people have tried to do in conversations I've had and just in back and forth I've had with readers is they're like, okay, well, which Rose is the real Rose for you? Like which Rose? And like people have tried to get me to pick which Rose is like the Rose. And I'm just like, no, like I've resisted doing that because that wasn't the point of the book. Like it's definitely not meant to be a polemic. It's not meant to be some sort of referendum on you either should be a mother or you shouldn't be a mother. It's really just meant to explore the choices that this one woman makes, but also that we all do as women, I think. And so I've been resistant to pick a rose. They're all my roses. They're all wonderful. So yeah.
That's fun. I like the double entendre of you've been resistant to pick a rose.
No, but I mean, you didn't
Right?
pick a rose, you picked all of them. And I think that's a great answer, because it's not like, oh, this one's like the most authentic. This one's
You have a bouquet of roses, and they're all roses, and they're all themselves.
We have a comment and question from Anna in the chat. I loved the possibilities of sainthood. Are you going to write more YA, or is your next book adult?
I can't believe someone's here that read The Possibilities of Sainthood. That was my very first novel. That makes me happy. I had so much fun writing The Possibilities of Sainthood. That was back when I didn't know I could write novels. And I was just like, oh, I had this idea for a character. And because I'm not one of those people who I feel like I'm on panels all the time where all the other writers on the panel, they'll be like, oh, when did you know when you wanted to be a writer? And everybody's like, oh, when I was 5, when I was 6. And I'm like, oh, when I was 30. So like I just sort of had an idea for a character, and I didn't have any skills as a writer. And I just started trying to write this novel. And then I just tried to learn how to write a novel. I just started studying books, I guess, and being like, how does this done? But wait, so what was the question? The possibilities of staying home. Oh, am I gonna write? Yes, I'm actually working on a middle grade right now. And I really have wanted to, so I love middle grade so much. And I've really been interested in writing about grandmother-granddaughter relationships, actually.
Ooh.
And so the tentative title is The History of Artichokes. and it's about it's the center of it is a grandmother and a granddaughter, and the artichokes thing is they sit on her back steps eating artichokes, and like that's her nickname. And so but yeah, so and she's struggling. Will there be cooking? Yes, of course there'll be cooking in it. One of the things that randomly also people have commented about Rose is I've gotten a bunch of comments like, I know that there's this book, this is not a book about food, but there are scenes where that really made me hungry in Rose. And I was like,
I also thought it was adorable there in one of the worlds where Rose has Addie, that her mother's nickname for her is Gnocchi. I thought that was really cute.
Yeah, well, they're Italian, but I think, and so in my other life, I was a food writer.
Oh,
Yeah. Or like I would have been like, I think my dream job, like if I was gonna like would be New York Times food critic. That's probably a lot of people's dream jobs, but I really love food, and I love to write about food, and I love to think about food, and I cook a lot, and so so yeah, I feel like especially with my kids' books, there's a lot of cooking and food in them. But Possibilities of Sainthood is all food all the time. So there's like food metaphors. I remember there's food jokes. My editor was like, when I was working on that book with my editor, who was a wonderful, great children's book editor, Frances Foster, who had edited Holes. She edited a million really important children's books during her lifetime, and but she used to say that like all my food jokes really made her laugh, but there'd be like 9 on a page, and she'd be like, okay, let's make it so there's 2. We're gonna pick 2 food jokes, we're gonna take the other 7 away, because then they'll really stand out. So I was like, okay, I can live with that.
That's funny. Are you planning on working on another adult book as well?
Yes. I've actually been doing a lot of soul searching. It usually takes me a while to figure out what feels really important to work on next, I guess. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately, because there's a way in which I thought, oh, well, I wrote about a character who doesn't want children, I guess that's done. Now I can't do that again. And then I have started to think about the fact that maybe there's room for more than one character who doesn't have or doesn't want children in literature.
Yep. I agree with you, because because of reasons you're about to explain.
Well, I guess it's one of the things I thought was just interesting, even about my own thinking about this, was I thought, oh, because I did this already, that means I can't do it again. And then I literally felt that way. And then I was like, oh, well, but then I'm sort of subscribing to the idea that there's only room for like one character that doesn't have children. And like, actually, I think, we talk so much about diversity and representation in literature. And this is really one of these women that's not represented in really any background. Like, I feel like women who don't have children, of which there is a great diversity, like, it's a category that encompasses a diversity of women, and yet we do not see a diversity of women who don't have children represented in literature. So it occurred to me like a big brainstorm, like, oh, like I could write another character who doesn't happen to have children and who has a life, like who, and maybe that's part of her identity. It's not the only thing that's driving the book, but like maybe that's okay, and actually maybe that's important. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about that.
I mean, I'd say so. My 2 best friends are child-free by choice, and strangely enough, they're also godmothers to my children, and they're lovely, but they have wonderful, fulfilling lives. And I know that they've gotten a lot of comments, and it kills me because their paths are their paths, and they're fulfilled, and they're traveling, and you know, they get to give my kids back after after a few hours and walk.
Jessica, you have to tell them. One of the things I've been doing, because I also do nonfiction research,
Uh-huh.
and then I like for Rose, I was like, you know, she had all these projects going in her book and in her role as a sociologist, and when I was writing the book, I was like really trying to think of real projects I would actually do. And anyway, after like one of the things that happened because of Rose was it got me in these conversations like publicly about the fact that I don't have children, and I've actually had young women specifically reaching out to me and talking about how they don't know any like older women, I'm an older woman now, who don't have children, and that this is important for them to see. And so anyway, I started doing this project where I've been interviewing a nonfiction project where I've been interviewing women who are choosing not to have children. So you should connect me to those women so I can interview them.
I will actually. One of them in particular, you want to talk about like changing roles, you know, like gender roles, and you know, just like going through things. She was actually a beauty queen when I met her, which yeah, she was in the Miss America pageant, but like knowing her now, it's so funny, like, you know, just the different things that she's done. And now she's living in Paris with her husband and their cats, and that's not a thing that she would have been able to do had she gone that route. So like she's done some really interesting things in her life, some of them which I think are like, you know, stereotypically what like a woman should aspire to be, like, oh, you're in a gown on a stage, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now she's just like, yeah, no, perfectly happy living with my husband in Paris. I can see the Eiffel Tower from my window and send your kids gifts and they can thank me and I don't have to deal with it. And my cats are enough for me. So
well, I want to talk to them. So you have to put us in touch over email.
Oh yeah, you'd love her. She's awesome. Stacey,
awesome.
We only have a few minutes left. Anything else from the audience?
There's been nothing else from the audience, but I just want to say I really like that the approach, and that you said that you want to do another character that chooses not to have kids, because I feel maybe not necessarily fully demonized, but they're always put in like the negative light of like, oh, you're going to be just, you know, a angry, upset married woman in a lonely house, or a spinster, and all these negative point of views of being like, oh, you can't have a fulfilling life if you're not the mom, and you know, you got to do this. And it's very nice to see that, because while I am a mom and married, and I even have a dog, but I have friends, like you said, Jessica, like that don't want to have kids by choice, and they're completely happy with it. Like one of my best friends, she's just like, yeah, no, like if my parents want grandkids, there's other siblings of mine that could do that, and it's also not their choice. But it's just great to see that it's making it more realistic and putting it in the light. Like you're filling the gap that's needed with these books. So thank you.
And also, yeah, one thing that I was thinking about, you know, and like you talk about like in-laws pushing, like it's not your body. It's not like, and I don't want to spoil anything for the people who are going to read it, but like anybody who's like met a woman who's had a baby, met a person who's been pregnant, like it affects your body, whether you're having a good pregnancy, a bad, like whatever, like really, like you are the one who has to change your wardrobe, who's going to be missing work because you're throwing up, who can't eat the cheese or drink the wine, which is not fun. Or like, you have to worry about what kind of ice cream you're eating. I mean, even women who want to have kids, like it's not your body. So like whenever a husband is pushing, or in-laws, it's like, great, so are you going to carry this child and have to worry about all the physical and emotional stuff that comes with a pregnancy and the aftermath?
I was going to end the aftermath.
I just think it's interesting that that it felt like this revelation to me that there could be other characters who don't have children. And like, I think it says something that it felt like a revelation. Like, it didn't occur to me that I'd be allowed to write another woman like that again, as though, oh, been there, like we only need one. Like, you know, there. And I just think it's interesting that that's, because I think we have a million mother characters, like a million of them. I mean, there's just, like, it's like there's just gobs of them. I don't think it would ever occur to a writer who's a mother that she couldn't keep writing a mother character over and over again, because it's just, that's what, they're just everywhere. And like, it's just constantly something we're all thinking about. But I don't think we're constantly thinking about life not as a mother. And that's just really absent in literature, or at least I felt that way as someone without children. Like, I don't feel represented in literature, like, at all. And I really crave, like, part of, like, one of the things I've been thinking so much about is just, I feel like choosing not to have children requires so much blind faith. It's like you're leaping into the abyss because you don't really have models of what will it look like when I'm in my 60s and 70s and 80s without children. Mostly what I've been told is that my life will be lonely, pathetic. I'll be like lonely, pathetic, and old. You know, I'll be alone. And I feel like I don't really buy that. I feel like there could be wonderful things ahead of me. I just am not shown those things by our culture. And so I feel like I really want to write into that place.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Donna, thank you so much. I'm going to email you with my friend's information. Yes. I'm going to actually ask her first. I'm going to be like, hey, is this cool with you?
But we talked about you.
We talked about you. Check it out on YouTube. I didn't give specifics, but about her, but she's awesome. So hopefully I'll be able to connect you. So once again, thank you to all of our watchers. And to Donna Freitas for doing this.
Thank you so much.
And to Stacy for co-hosting with us. Check out any of Syosset Library's virtual programming this summer. I think even though COVID is hopefully waning, and we hope to move into in-person as the fall comes on, virtual programming has actually been really nice. So we're going to be doing some of it as well still.
Yeah, we'll still be doing it. You could bring us to the beach, to the pool.
Stay
wherever.
On your couch. We're not judging. Whatever you want.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for doing this. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. And if you didn't read the book, the library has it.
or your local independent bookstore.
Yes.
.org or your library again. So have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.